already. For people who don't know me, I am Serkan Özay, co-founder and creative director of Hero Concept. Normally, for these kinds of events, I would usually talk about how to survive as an indie developer, but now I'm going out of my comfort zone and I would like to talk about something else. Now, while we were creating Mayhem Brawler, one of the important things were beta testing process, and I will talk about these experiences that we have had. Now, what was Mayhem Brawler? It has the soul of a 90s arcade game. It has been published in all platforms. It is not hyper casual at all. Steam, PlayStation, Xbox, Nintendo, and iArcade even we have published it on. And if we were to include today's subject as well for this game, after we had two regular updates and two major updates after publication, and I'm going to have some parts in this presentation, of course, the process of development, and while the process is continuing, the demo process after publication, our beta testing has continued and we still have a branch for beta testing. Currently, we don't have anything new in place, but we still continue on that. And I would like to also share some results from that. And we have published Mayhem Brawler and our ratings are not bad. We have some awards, and as you can see, I also have to lose some weight, but let's continue. Now, this image is the first images that I've found that from Turkish games, and these are the reviews of Turkish games, prominent Turkish games in Steam. And of course, maybe you have purchased the mostly positive one, but if it says mixed, you wouldn't purchase it. For example, there are some with 1500 reviews with mixed reviews, but we even have mostly negative ones. I'm not going to name the games. You can find them yourself. So why is it so important? It is important for the game's reach. Of course, our experience is not just about Steam, but Steam is the easiest place to get this data. So that's why I wanted to share these data. So can you also predict these? I would say yes. The Metacritic points and scores of our game, I guessed the scores close enough to 2 points out of 100. So what did we do? From starting with the point that we had a playable version, we started to look for beta testers, and this is the most important thing because you can't just do it yourself. So of course, who should you pick? Which feedbacks should you focus on? This is a big problem. And to be honest, and this is something you may not be able to solve in the first game because it took 3 games to develop a game that sells for us, and I think maybe you might even lower that to 2 or even 1 by listening to these speeches and seminars. Hopefully it won't go over to 4. I mean, I will go over the profiles. First of all, of course, this is you. First profile is the developer. themselves. Of course, there are advantages and disadvantages. As you can say, the biggest advantage is time, because tester wouldn't give you their time. I'm not talking about professional QA testers. Quality assurance testing is not what I'm talking about. This is entirely about the feedback you get for the game's playability, and for your own testing you would give a quality time because it's your game and whatever. And in addition to that, you would also have enough knowledge to evaluate this information. But of course, we had, for example, had a problem about difficulty levels, and it was such a hard game. People were crying about it, and people were not able to do it. It was because we were in an echo chamber, and there are people who prefer harder games, but unless you're an indie darling or a very big company, if you make a Souls-like or a very difficult game, you can't sell it. If you produce a very hard game, you would see that in reviews, so people wouldn't purchase it. But on the other hand, there's an opposite effect, because nobody would say while playing Dead Cells, so it is such a hard game. But if you produce a Dead Cells, a similar game to Dead Cells with similar difficulty, you will see that. Because in Darling's Invasion, our previous game, there were huge paragraphs about the difficulty of our game, and they wouldn't say anything about Dead Cells or any other similar difficult game. They wouldn't even have a word about difficulty in those games. So also another issue is you're going to have an emotional connection with your project, and what I'm going to talk about mostly is something that will also help you on your personal character development. I am saying this as somebody is in their 40s. Building a game, developing a game also improves myself, because you learn to get feedback and criticism. Because since 97, I earn my wage from artistic endeavors. And even though that is the case, I've never received similar criticism I have taken from gaming, that multidisciplinary criticism. And this is the first one. These are the obvious points that you would guess as well. So let's continue. This is my favorite profile. People who people close to you. Of course, I've sent many friends keys and they've tried the game and they've played it. This also has a great advantage in terms of moral support, and they would say, oh, this is a great game, this is very successful, and this is perfect. But I've died when I've reached the fat guys. Which fat guys? You move forward and it goes. Are you talking about the first encounter? Yeah, that's right. That's when I died. This is level 1. This is, this was the second enemy you face. The same person 3 days later, I called them again, and they again would say that it's a great, perfect game, and they would say that I've passed the fat guys and I've found guns. This is the next encounter, just after the second enemies. So people who your friends would give you great moral support, but they would help your ego and moral maybe, but at the end of the day, if they don't know the genre, and they wouldn't purchase it if you hadn't made the game. So I wouldn't recommend this profile for testers. Your friends should not be included. Yes, give them keys, but those feedbacks will be would not be great. That will be censored because also they wouldn't, you know, this guy couldn't even pass the first encounter. So, you know, so he most likely thought that it was too difficult. He couldn't play it. So he didn't say that to me. He censored himself. So that feedback had deficiencies like that. So it's not helpful to you. It is unfortunately not useful. So in the third game, we had passed through that, but in the first two games, we unfortunately had that problem a lot, and we give it to the friends, and they would say this and that, but unfortunately, they would feel it is difficult. They wouldn't like something, and they would just not tell their real ideas. Even if you are not really familiar with the genre, think about it like a car. The car has a direct the steering wheel and whatever controls. You just share what your ideas. For example, if the game is not communicating properly to you, or you would have this image, the situation like this image. I think I picked that image properly. Third profile, influencers. Of course, I'm not talking about John Sungur right here. I'm talking about more typical influencers. The influencers that know the genre of your games, and people who gather about 50 to 100 people when they stream. I'm talking about those people. They would very much like to be included in the process. When you give them better access, they would be very happy, and they would have very good intentions, and they would give quality feedback as well. And also they would stream while you publish a demo or you publish the game. They would give their support, and we had some beta testers in this profile, and we had shared with him the first three levels. As much as you can play it, and you can stream it as well. And they had shown these levels, but unfortunately they didn't, because they wouldn't be able to stream the rest of the game. They didn't even take a look at it, for example, some of them, because they weren't going to be able to stream. Of course, there is a risk of rejection, or for example, another experience that I've had from backlashing, and this is a beta game, and this guy, for example, didn't recognize the system, and they thought the game didn't work, and it rage quit. So their viewers also had a bad experience with that. So while you wanted to receive feedback, you realize that this created a worse experience and worse backlash for that. But this one is something I recommend a lot. This profile is something I recommend as well, because sometimes some of them, for example, can give you pages of recommendations, and they might analyze it in a very well, and they could have some variant to their recommendations. For example, if that doesn't work, you can also do it this way. They can share their own unique ideas or some examples from gaming history that you could receive great feedback from that. Now, in our fourth profile, I've called it speedrunners. Now, this is not about the professional speedrunners. This is like a crazy gamers. So, for example, we are designing the game's screen, and we had, in the design, you can see the six digits, and you can see our programmer. Let's say we had never had the score higher than 85. So they might make about 150,000 scores. So that's what I said, six digits. So that guy sent the video and we are taking a look at it. He is over 1 million. So because it didn't have enough digits, his score was unable to be showed. So because of that, we have to redesign that. So this guy was playing so well. For example, there is a combo system, and as long as your combo counter goes on, it's improving exponentially. So he never got hit. He finishes the score with a full combo. So he had millions of scores. He had such a higher combos. We had 80,000 and he went over millions. So our experience was 80, but the guy just went over. That's why we called that patch Zigo patch from him. We had to create a patch to that game just for that. Thankfully, he only played in PC, so we quickly created that and we postponed the patch to another big update on other platforms. And other than that, of course, they could have a very unique and extreme recommendation. For example, in our game, we had combo mechanics, so some of the guys would start juggling the enemies and he started doing things that we didn't design for. For example, they start to using infinite cycles for bosses, so the boss can't even give any responses and it immediately dies. Stuff like that, they would find exploitations of the systems, and they would also share how to close this exploitation or system abuses. Also, after the game gets published in their second playthrough, they would they would finish the game in 1.5 hours. Then they would try to get high scores. Then they would get bored quickly. We had two major updates, so we also included them in the beta testing process. While in beta testing, of course, they can't stream it, but after release, they shared it, and well, they were included. They liked being included. Of course, for the difficulty level of the game, you should not listen to them because they are not inhumane levels. Even in the most difficult setting, they would don't get hit once. They would full combo the entire level. There was a film called Mercury Rising, and I think it was talking about the human factor and differences in that. So whatever. For the after demo, I've created another profile for that, and the reason for that, if you are not a big firm, you could have a Steam demo or festivals. You can share your demos in festivals. You have to share that. It could be a suicide for a smaller team, for the publishers or teams that are making their first or second games, and this is going to have the best feedback. For example, for the rating scores, I think I foreseen that from the scores and feedback we received from demos, and I was only mistaken about 1 to 2% difference. And because of that, they would pray it, they would create a review for that, and also they would send a mail, they would enter your Discord and share in that area, and also they would give you Q&A daily. You would think you were communicating properly for something, but they might not be able to understand a specific system, and you would realize that, especially in mobile industry, they would have, while QA testing, they would give the phone to the player and they would film that to see what they are doing and what they're not understanding or properly understanding. So you would have a lot of voluntary QA, and also they will share their ideas. In Mayhem Brawler, for example, we had a superhero team and we wanted them to use superhero powers instead of weapons. But after demo uh, testing, we decided to add weapons because it needed that. And if we didn't do that, we might not even be speaking right here, right now. So also there is an understanding for demo players, as unfortunately big companies has created this understanding. Unfortunately, if there is something in demo release, unfortunately these giant companies are usually not updated, and some giant releases are released like a beta. So unfortunately, what you have is a vertical slice demo, and it is going to improve. But they might think that these points that are bad in the demo, for example, they think it might not get updated. Some of them would say that these areas should be improved, but someone else would just call your game a trash. Another thing about the demo process is, for example, we would get some demo videos and they would share your extremely old videos and they would write a comment on that. You have newer videos, updated videos. So why did you caring about these ancient video, for example? I can't understand that for now. I think it might be about YouTube algorithms, but I'm not sure. But those, for example, old videos that show old bugs, unfortunately, those videos are online forever, unfortunately. And for some reason, people are not saying that this might be an old video. Let me check if there is a newer one. They might not say that. So, all right, let's continue with the after publication. Now, there's a advantage in numbers right here. Before I can say is, if you had 20 testers or 50 testers, if one of them were to say, should this area be like this or should we make it like this? If you don't care about it, let's say if you had 10,000 sales or 50,000 sales, now that one person would become 1,000 people, and that many people would vomit that feedback to you. So this is the reality. So that's why that maturity has come to us after 2 games, and we would dismiss them just because they were only one person, and going over that understanding is unfortunately take time. When you get when you get started when you get started to receiving bidding from your reviews, for example, you realize the importance of that. If two QA testers or demo players have shared that opinion, for example, we would definitely 100% work on that. And if we have even only one feedback, we would definitely note that. After publication, you would have a lot of feedbacks, but some things can be changed, some things cannot be changed. First week sales would show your yearly sales for example, for the first week. If you sell 500 copies, you can't sell more than 2,500 for the entire year. This is not a number that changes. This is the case in film industry as well, and in the PC console industry, this is the case. Unless there is a big phenomenal situation, I think in Among Us, something that has been discovered later, or a big influencer just puts a spotlight on that. But these things doesn't happen a lot. For example, yes, there is an achievement, but this is not something that is repeatable. So usually the numbers are in that manner. And the thing is, what you realize after publication is, even if you get the perfect criticism, the better feedback you receive is about quarter of what you would receive after publication. The real data is unfortunately, however properly you beta test, however you much care about the beta test, only you would only get about 25% of the feedback. The mass feedback would be created after publication. If we didn't have reviews or feedbacks, if we didn't follow that, I follow the sales graphic, it would conclude in a bad position. For example, plateau is the end of the sales basically. So we had some major updates and we had radical changes. For example, something we didn't think about. In the original, we didn't have air combos. We didn't have guns or weapons in the original design. So that's why maybe we didn't think about these things. But what would be the advantage if we add it? What would be the disadvantage if we don't add it? That is something for you to evaluate. But if there is a lot of requests for a similar specific things, there's a reason for that. When your game reaches thousands of people, that feedback number is going to exponentially grow as well. As I said at the start, I've shown you the review scores, and that will be the point. For example, you had 200 or 300 reviews. That means you require 5 positive reviews. Maybe a game that is selling 100,000 or 200,000 sales, but a more smaller indie companies, there is these 3 or 10 reviews are very important. So that's why you have to listen, and you shouldn't say that they don't know what they are talking about.
So if you're ready, I would like to give a recommendation. The Refunders. So let me put that way. One of our games has the points of the rate of our game has been down on up to 76, but we increased that all the way to 86 because there's a major difference between those two rate points. One of the things that I did was, for example, is there anyone who would refund their games on Steam? Yes, of course you did. If you noticed, it doesn't require anything. It doesn't ask anything, but there's a text bar right there. Is there anyone who would fill that up, the description box? Wow. I read them all. I don't know how many developers read that, but all of them are psychologically burning you out because the players might be obsessed about everything and you cannot read them all at once. When you look at some points, the whole process makes you better and better. No one actually would give that explicit feedback to you, even in fight, in a very sincere way. No one will do that. No one would refund something to you, give it back to you, and provide a long feedback. This means that the person is disappointed, and you can understand the reason for the disappointment. For example, as you know, in the game, we had a social media feed, and there are many complaints on that, as you know. For example, one of them asked that he wished that he would be able to use the combo without any animation, jumping animation. So, normally what we did in our games about, getting up and attacking with a new animation. You're jumping and you set your foot on the floor, and that man who wanted us to create the character in a way that the character will attack in a fast way. So, apart from that, those viewers expect many things, other things as well. Sometimes they say that that blonde character used a sentence. They obsess about them, the characters and their lines, and they provide very long feedback. I'm laughing at them, but I felt really bad when I read them. When you ignore them, you sometimes have the confidence that that is nothing. So after these 6 recommendations, so these are all that I had in my mind. If I have time, we have time. All right. I was not as efficient as Ertuğrul Süngü. I didn't use my time very efficiently, but we have time for Q&A. Is there anyone who would like to ask some questions? You can also ask for questions from chat. I don't think our audience is the major ones. For some reason, fighting games having continued. The person asking the question is not heard. So the translation cannot be provided. So the profile that I recommend is niche influencer model. You need to find a couple of them, Yes, definitely. You need to find who are familiar with the type of the game. You cannot achieve it with your colleagues or friends. That is the first one that you need to find. But when we are talking about influencer, as that person will capture a video, the video is really important. If you provide a bug report, if you don't have any video, then you can solve the bug in 5 minutes. Or if the review, for example, is that they want to do canceling, but they cannot describe it with written in a written form, and some Americans do not speak properly their language, and then with video you can understand the bug and you solve it very easily. I hope my answer satisfied your question. There's one other question. Interpretation cannot be provided as the speaker cannot be heard. In the company, I have the title as Mountain King. So what you said is hierarchy based. So especially in long-term projects, it's normal that the workers get burned out. And there's a problem about testing. That person in normal circumstances might not buy the game. So if that person is not your audience and that person is not your target audience, then the test is not an important. So the same effect, you will get the same effect as you can see on my slide. Normally, although that person is not acquainted with you, you need to take a look at, you need to see the first criteria, whether that person will generate money for you. So you're asking how long it take the development process? Yes, it's 18 months. Except the last 6 months of the process went in the period of COVID-19. So the content creation period was in COVID times, but so we did what we aimed at. But I personally think that the design process of game development cannot be completed in a remote way. I think the start date was about August 2020. So sorry, it's not August 2020, it was 2019. First meetings were held back then. And then at the start of 2021, we started to set out for the journey. As I said, there's a cultural phenomenon there. It's about gaming culture. Fighting developed, but these types of games have not developed, unfortunately. I don't know the reason. If we can involve more complex mechanics, it become arcade, but it could have been developed because it has the same mechanisms of the fighting games back then. New reverse mechanisms have been generated, but beat-ups have not been developed, especially in the 80s. Also, it's not competitive. That's the game changer, another game changer. Oh, it's still niche. I just provide the reason. So while we were developing that game, another game was in the pipeline. A couple of mechanics were inspired from that game, but what you said, revolutionary, is not included in the type of game. So honestly, at some point of my career, I decided not to create a game that I normally wouldn't play. So I'm creating games that I normally would play. Some companies think that Star Valley is successful, so I need to create games like Star Games. So although a company is based on that particular genre, some companies provide some unrelated type of games. Well, I don't know. So it was a third iteration of the game. So the brand sells it, but you cannot. Maybe we can sell a brand soon. We will see it. Thank you. Oh, we have time. We can answer many questions as you want. My question is about feedbacks. The person asking the question cannot be heard. When you establish that the software that will track it, sometimes the virus detectors would scan it and find them as virus, then you will get failure. Some track systems do not do that, but in order to track data, you need to have an inner purchase. Other than that, the data tracking would not be beneficial for you. Maybe you can read some reviews on that. It's not about data collection and marketing. It's not that type of sector. So you need to manually the views and apprehensions. So the mechanical data mining is not all the way beneficial. After the NFT emerged, the free-to-play games have become easier in my eyes. So by the way, in terms of testing in mobile, I don't know what your sector is. Is it hyper casual? What you call hyper is about using the whole studio for testing. What we do is that we create games. In the process, we conduct the testing. But there, the hyper casual game studios, they do differently. So that field is wholly based on test. So because the publisher on the up and the down stories, they're testing teams, so they're placing a lot of importance in testing. Any other question? You hesitated to raise your question. I think a good question is coming up. So let's see. The question is about recruitment of interns, and we have a new system for internships. You fill an online form, and we diligently controlling them all. We had 170 applications. If I had some rooms, I would get 40 interns. There's a good competition. I would normally get them all. The generations are different than our generation. Normally, interns will come here and do the office work all the time, like a paper boy, being an office boy. But now there are great interns with huge background that you would offer a job. So I can say that the competition is very high. Where does it come from? It comes from the hyper casual field. It's okay. In everything, there is a good will. Two other questions that I think our participants online cannot understand the question, and we can write them out. So portfolio is important. like ArtStation, GitHub, all of them is important. It's also important for job postings as well. It was told by the HR managers as well. For example, in some CVs, we don't see any GitHub or ArtStation profile. Sometimes there are some applicants using GitHub or other types of platforms without any works in it. In past, they will just come and sit. The interns that would come and sit in the past, but now it's not like that. No, the whole business have changed. What we look at, our criteria is how disciplined his or her code is. So if you can closely take a look at the codes, you can understand if it's copy paste or not. In game design side, game design document samples are important. I've just trained one, and there's one of my colleagues that I trained. He will teach the people in the sector soon, I hope. So you need to learn as well the templates and samples, you know. Everything is portfolio. The portfolio shows everything. From as far as my experience say, anyone that I choose becomes successful. So I'm really against about testing and making people work for free. We do not do that. I have no comment for those who do that. Yes, another question. You asked a lot. You came in the office and you asked many questions 1 month. Yeah, you're playing for the crowd. So the question is about the questions that you ask your testers, and is there anything that you place importance in terms of social culture manner? Our testers are actually pity ones, because GitHub are more based on arcade, and arcade studios maybe you do not know. There used to be a holiday site, but it was moved to Turkmenistan, and then maybe from Turkmenistan came to another country. Those arcade machines came to us 10 years later. So this is why I think that way. We are trying to choose those who are familiar with those arcade machines, but it depends on the project. When you make a retro game, then you can get that kind of advantage. So last question. You can get the same trajectory that I have, but you shouldn't be eating as much as dessert I ate. You're using Unity. We have used Unity, but as two experienced founders, we are not planning to use Unity. We are using the game engine, but the editor phase is fully customized. And in terms of appearance of our games, it was designed by the UI designers as a person with the game graphic design background and expertise. I do our own graphic design and UI design. So Clip Studio was used for the character design, not with Photoshop. And Unity has advantages, of course. If you're not doing it 3D based, maybe Unity would be a better solution for you. If you're using mobile games, if you're doing mobile games, then Unity will be the single one that you need to be mounted on. So thank you all for your questions and for your participation. And thank you for this organization. I'm going.